Audience discretion is advised due to potentially distressing and sensitive material. Alice Ruggles was kind, clever, and beautiful. She had an infectious personality and an incredible sense of humor. She chose to see the best in everyone and had fun with everything. She loved life and everything life had to offer. She made friends wherever she went and lightened up every room she walked into. She was the third of four children and grew up with her sister and brothers, Emma, Nick, and Patrick, in the Leicestershire village of Turlington. She was from a close-knit family who really cared for one another, and they even had a WhatsApp group where they all chatted up about everything that was going on in their lives and exchanged lively banters. Even though she was the third child, Alice didn't struggle much making her presence known through her jokes and pranks. She was born to entertain and had a very busy social life. She could be found singing in school concerts and singing karaoke at friends' parties. She played in the school pantomime. She performed comic pieces in house events. She sang in the chamber choir and she almost became the year group champion on sports day when she fell on her face at the start of the final race, which she found hilarious and laughed about for weeks. She helped organize the school ball and fenced ever since she was 11. Fencing became a huge part of her life, and she started selecting potential universities based on the strength of their fencing club when she was only 18. Alice chose Northumbria and became the club captain. Just like in other aspects of her life, she thrived at fencing and won the women's épée at the Leeds Open in 2012. After graduating from Northumbria University in product design, Alice decided to stay in Newcastle, having come to love the city. She landed a job at media giant Sky's Newcastle hub and was quickly promoted to site coordinator and personal assistant to the head of sales. She loved her job and she loved her flatmates. Everything seemed to be going really well for this beautiful 24-year-old. She had her whole life ahead of her. In early 2016, Alice received a Facebook message from Lance Corporal Trymon Harry Dillon, who went by Harry, that said he'd seen a photo of her on a mutual friend's page and commented that she was the most naturally beautiful woman he'd ever seen. They immediately began communicating through Facebook, and Alice learned that he was born in India and was 26 years old. At the time they started communicating, he was serving in a non-combat role in Afghanistan. They met face-to-face in January 2016 while he was spending time in Newcastle and Edinburgh before returning. Harry portrayed himself to be a very romantic gentleman, showering her with gifts and flowers with sweet romantic notes attached, and in return she would send him care packages to Afghanistan. Little by little, Harry started changing and showing his true colors. It was gradual but constant. He started exhibiting controlling behavior like expecting Alice to be available to answer his calls at all hours and making a big deal out of it if she didn't, and accused her of either not caring about him as much as he did and guilt-tripping her into apologizing to him, or he would accuse her of cheating on him, which again somehow ended with her apologizing and proving that she wasn't being unfaithful. He also began making snide comments about her appearance to undermine her confidence, like making comments about her arm hair and nose. In one instance, her friends recalled that Dylan made Alice get out of the shower and stand in the kitchen naked and wet so he could use the toilet in the bathroom, degrading her for dressing provocatively in public, while he would also degrade her if she didn't dress provocatively enough for his taste. When Alice was out with her friends or just chilling with them at home, Harry would turn up unannounced and make her live with him, which created a great gap between Alice and her friends. She was missing out on all the inside jokes and gossip and was feeling left out. Eventually, Harry isolated her and Alice was left feeling lonely and depressed, leading to Alice having a falling out with her flatmates and moving in with one of her colleagues, Maxine. Because of all this, her work also suffered. Everyone could see that the bubbly, fun-loving, carefree Alice was just a shell of her former self. Alice was then contacted by a woman who claimed that Dylan had befriended her on a dating website and they were planning on hooking up. And given everything that Alice had gone through because of him, it didn't take much thought for her to decide to break up with him. Though this didn't mean that their relationship was over for Dylan. He was not taking no for an answer, and in the coming weeks, he bombarded Alice with calls, messages, and emails, and even unwanted gifts. Some of the messages were pleading and begging for Alice to take him back, but some were aggressive and threatening. After a while, he even started contacting her family through social media, pleading with them to talk to her into getting back with him. Well, this was the August and September of 2016. He would emotionally blackmail Alice. He'd call her and profess his undying love for her, telling her that he would never give up and they were meant to get married. He cried over the phone and even threatened to kill himself. He was officially obsessed with Alice. Now, Alice, on the other hand, who was recovering from months of emotional abuse and was going back to who she initially was trying her best to be pleasant with him and keep him from doing anything crazy. Dylan hacked into her social media in order to find her whereabouts, read her messages, and see what she was up to. He also threatened to release compromising photos he'd taken of her without her knowledge. Through the same way, he found out in September that Alice had begun dating another man, an army officer called Mike who she'd met in Germany, and tried his very best to convince him that Alice was two-timing him. He forged text messages from Alice to himself, having her social media information, saying that Alice had confessed her love for him and painted a false picture of who Alice really was. However, Alice's new partner Mike didn't believe him, and his relationship with Alice only grew stronger. He was obsessed with their relationship and was obsessing over whether Mike was better than him. He even talked to friends and family about this, asking them if they thought Mike was better than him. Now, if you want to look at the timeline here, Dylan started becoming obsessed with Alice in August through to September. On September 30th, Dylan started showing up at Alice's property unannounced. He'd ring the doorbell and hide while Alice checked who it was through the peephole. He then got used to driving back and forth to her apartment without her knowledge and went as far as climbing the fence into her backyard and knocking on Alice's ground floor window and leaving flowers and chocolates on her windowsill. When Alice opened the curtains, he started backing off. As he was heading back to Edinburgh after this incident, he left a chilling message for her which Maxine, Alice's roommate, also heard, repeating over and over again that he didn't want to kill her. This whole driving to her house to stalk her becomes a pretty routine thing. Mind that we are talking about 5-hour, 214-mile round trips from Glencorse Barracks in Midlothian to Gateshead to knock on her bedroom window. The combination of all he was doing and the fact that it was escalating led Alice to getting into contact with the police, who were initially sympathetic and reassured Alice that there was a legal way to stop this behavior and that she was gonna be safe. The officer explains that she could go to a solicitor and take out an injunction, or the police could issue a police information notice or a PIN, which means that if he ever comes near her again, he would be arrested for violating the PIN. Alice decides to go with the PIN and one is issued. On October 3rd, Dylan got the PIN and was told by the police, his army superior, and even friends and colleagues to stop harassing Alice and just leave her alone. But he didn't. Within 4 days, on October 7th, Dylan had sent Alice a parcel containing some items and a letter which complained that she had called the police on him and now he is facing repercussions for what she has done. He lies that the police had picked him up, shut him in a room, and taken away all his electronics. He goes on saying, quote, "I'm in a lot of shit now, but hope you two," meaning Alice and Mike, "a happy life. I will never come in your life again." End quote. She reported this to the police right away, although they were less than sympathetic this time around and no action was taken. I mean, this conversation was not even recorded as linked to the previous crime. This makes Alice feel distraught, as she feels like she is powerless and should live in terror until when Dylan decides torturing her is enough. She was made to feel that arresting him was not an option and that she was just wasting police time. At one point, she was asked if she wanted him to be arrested, but Alice declined, not wanting to ruin his career, and told a friend that she felt palmed off. She also chillingly told her sister Emma that the police would only, quote, respond when he stabs me, end quote. But she did do everything in her power to regain control of her life. She took measures to feel a little bit safer, like making sure that she was driven home by a colleague every night, and she double locked the door the second she got in. Alice becomes introverted, she starts losing weight, she starts to physically and visibly shake, she becomes anxious. But even with all these efforts to feel safe, Dylan still went back on October 10th after dark, climbed into her backyard and took pictures of the rear window and 2 photos of her in the bathroom. On October 12th, Dylan again drove to Alice's from Edinburgh and parked near her house till she got home from work. While he was waiting for her, he was messaging another woman hoping for a casual hookup later that night back in Scotland. It was around 6 p.m. when he again climbed over the fence to her house, forced his way in through a back window, and got into Alice's flat. He picked up a sharp kitchen knife and cornered Alice in the bathroom. Alice was trying on a new ball gown and messaging her new boyfriend. All contact stopped at around 6 p.m. 30 minutes later, Maxine returned home to fetch her phone before heading to her boyfriend's place for the night. As she was checking her messages, she noticed Alice was lying dead on the bathroom floor and called the police, referring to Dylan as, quote, absolute psychopath, and telling the police that he'd been harassing, stalking, and torturing Alice for months. Thanks to Maxine, Dylan was arrested back at the barracks just a few hours later, trying to climb out over the wall. He denied having any knowledge of Alice's death, but there was overwhelming evidence. Her blood was found on his Help for Heroes wristband and on the steering wheel of his BMW, and CCTV footage had picked him up driving away from the scene of the crime. In addition, it was also revealed later that a previous partner had suffered a similar stalking ordeal where she was approached on the street by Dylan when he called her a bitch and spat in her face. It is thought that he held Alice's head up while kneeling on her back and slashing her throat at least 6 times, cutting through the spine. The 24-year-old suffered 24 injuries, including defensive wounds. Alice was helpless. Dylan was a foot taller and 3 stones heavier. Needless to say, he had no injuries. Even with this, Dylan claimed that he'd never attacked Alice, and Alice had attacked him with the knife when he told her he was seeing another woman later that night, and while he was trying to disarm her, she accidentally stabbed herself in the neck. He said the knife was stuck in her neck and he pulled it out with some difficulty, but was too scared to call the police. But it took the jury less than 2 hours to dismiss his story. At the same time, the pathologist also stated that his accounts of events was inconsistent with the injuries. They added, Alice's neck had been sliced and slashed at least 6 times, with her carotid artery, windpipe, and voice box cut through to her spine. Another story he told was that she came for him with a knife and he put her in a headlock to restrain her, and she collapsed in the bathroom, hitting her head and cutting her nose on some scales. When she came to, she attacked him because he told her he was meeting another woman. He claimed that the whole thing was a combination of self-defense and accident. He claimed that she was insecure and always accused him of looking at other women, and at one point even made him delete girl Facebook friends that he'd previously dated. When under questioning, he said, quote, she brought marriage up. She showed me a ring with a blue gem on it and said, do you like this kind of ring? End quote. At the trial, the 26-year-old defendant also said, quote, I never at any point considered myself to be stalking her. End quote. On August 26, 2017, Dylan was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 22 years for the act of utter barbarism, and is currently jailed at HMP Durham. At sentencing, the judge remarked, quote, you were harassing her, you were stalking her, you were destroying her, end quote. Judge Sloan continued, quote, not a shred of remorse have you shown from first to last. Indeed, you were concentrating so hard on getting your story right when giving evidence, you forgot even to shed a crocodile tear. Dr. Sue Hills, Alice's mom, said in 2017, quote, 2 days before Alice died, she said to me, "Mom, I think he's gonna kill me." And I just thought, this doesn't happen. But it does happen. She continued, "The feeling of failure will stay with me forever." Dr. Hills added that she felt she had failed her daughter by teaching her to see the good in everyone. Alice's family started a foundation raising awareness about stalking, abusive relationships, and domestic violence. They believe that in order to put a stop to situations like this, you need to first recognize that you're in that situation. This might sound off to some of you, but as someone who was in an abusive relationship for 4 years, I can tell you that I didn't recognize that I was way after the relationship was over, and by that point, there was nothing left of my initial personality. I can tell you that he treated me just the way Dylan treated Alice, but I always thought he really cared about me, and he kept telling me that no one will ever love me as much as he did, gaslighting me and stringing me along. He wanted me to answer whenever he called, texting back the second he texted me, show up whenever and wherever he wanted me to, no matter where I was, and it didn't matter that I was at school or at work. When he wanted me there, I had to be there. Otherwise, I was cheating. I wasn't loyal, I didn't love him as much as he loved me, and I always ended up apologizing after I spent a couple of days living in hell pleading with him. Not to mention that he always preferred his friends to me, and if he got the chance, he would choose them over me and never even reply to my texts and calls until the next day. And I didn't have the right to say anything to him, because if I did, I would end up telling him, "Yeah, I know you're right, I didn't mean to make you feel like that, you need to do your thing." He always undermined whatever I said and gave me the impression that I was stupid and just a girly girl who couldn't do anything for herself, so I always felt dependent on him. I remember when I finally broke things up after he proposed, I changed my workplace and no one knew except for my parents and my siblings. Out of the blue, he texted me and said, "You never told me you've started working at X." He was mad and he knew the address, the people I worked with, and what I was wearing and where I parked my car. Later, I learned he had hacked my Facebook and email. The list goes on and on and on, but my point is, even though a lot of people showed me the red flags, I didn't see them. So I think it is very important for young girls to know what an abusive relationship looks like and what they should stay away from at any cost. Being stalked and harassed is unfortunately not an uncommon thing. It happens every day to both men and women, and they need to be taken seriously.